and how they work and whatever they want to share with us. So as you can see, tonight's speaker is Linda Barnicott, who has brought a lot of stuff to share with us tonight, which is awesome. So it's nothing better than for an artist than to see other artists' originals and learn about what they do. So before I do that real quick, I just wanted to say that if you haven't already, we have an email notification list for the Artist Guild. So if you sign up and give me your email, every month Sweetwater will send out to you who our next speaker is. It's the first Wednesday of every month. And if you can't join us in person, we are live streaming every meeting now this year. So we've got the live stream going on over here. So welcome to everybody out there. And we also have all the recordings of all of our speakers on YouTube. So for the last few months, if you missed our speakers, you can go back and watch the recordings and learn about the amazing artists that are here in our town. Other than that, everything here is, hey, John.
Hi, John. Anywhere you want.
So other than that, it's free to be here for the Artist Guild. So invite your friends, neighbors, whomever is just interested in art and artists. We don't discriminate and there's no membership fee. We basically just use your emails to tell you who's speaking next, and that's it. So it's basically just a way to kind of network and get to know these amazing artists that kind of work in our backyard. So I'm just going to read Linda Barnicott's short bio here. I think if I went through her long bio, we'd probably be here for about 2 hours. I've been fortunate enough to call Linda my friend for, how long now? 20 years? I don't know.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, we've been buds for a long time. And so it's really my honor to have her here tonight and kind of put her on a pedestal and share what she does with all of you guys. So, but this is her short bio. So Linda has been known for creating portraits since her childhood. Linda is now known for her enchanting portraits of Pittsburgh. Using rich, soft pastels, she captures the unique beauty of famous Pittsburgh landmarks. A few awards Linda was honored to receive was a special proclamation from the city of Pittsburgh, if you can believe it, celebrating her iconic paintings, and she was also chosen as the official artist of the Three Rivers Regatta. The 50th anniversary of the Light Up Night, which is on New Year's Eve, and the Macy's 100th anniversary of the Kaufman Clock. But what she cherishes most is her 17 years that she has been creating holiday cards for the American Cancer Society and raising over $750,000 for cancer research and prevention through her artwork, which is totally amazing. For Linda, art has always been about giving joy. It's also been about beautiful images, as you will see. So please welcome me tonight in welcoming Linda Barnicott. I'm going to pretend this is a microphone so I have a lifeline to hold on to. Hello, everybody in YouTube land. Thank you for joining us. I wish you could see the whole room. Thank you for having me. Christine asked me before COVID broke out, and then we had to kind of wait on this. However, I was not an easy catch because I'm very nervous about doing this. I consider all of you wonderful artists, and I feel very humbled to be in your presence. So with that, I just want to introduce myself. I am Linda Barnicott. I am a Pittsburgh artist, and I've been painting Pittsburgh since 1989. But actually, a lot of people ask me, when did you start drawing? Actually, somebody asked me that tonight. Carol. If you believe my mom, it was 18 months. Forget it. Okay. My first memory was actually first day of second grade. I went to a Catholic school, and my first year in Catholic school, the sister's name was Sister St. Rose. Now, let me tell you, she was no saint, nor was she a rose. And so the first day of second grade, a lay teacher walked into her room, and I thought she was the most beautiful woman that I'd ever seen. And of course, that was way before we had cameras around. So I remember picking up my notepad and opening it up and drawing her portrait because I wanted to show my mom what she looked like. Now, it could have been 2 dots for her eyes and a dot for her nose. I have no clue. All I know was I was fascinated with her. And I found myself one of those daydreamers in school. So as I grew through the grades, I drew a lot of my teachers because I was sitting there doodling, and I loved people's faces. I really fell in love with it. When I got into 6th grade, I was one of those kids that got bullied. And I got bullied really bad. And there was this one girl, though, that was like the worst. And I tried everything. I brought in candy money, anything that I could do to kind of win this girl over, and nothing worked. And so one day I decided I would draw her portrait and give it to her. And she actually stopped bullying me for a couple months. And I did it again. And I got through 6th grade drawing her portrait 3 times. Okay? And when I look back on it, I think that was my first marketing moment. When I realized I can do something with this. I can save my aching nose. She actually had hit me while we were in class with the substitute teacher drawing on the board. And she came up, throttled me in the nose, sat back down. I had a bloody nose, and the teacher turned around and says, "Can I get the ladies' room? I have a bloody nose." I never said anything. But that was that kind of bullying that was going on. By the time I got to be a senior, I was doing everybody's girlfriend and boyfriend pictures, like the little class pictures you get. And one day, one of these cool kids came out of class and he says, "Linda, will you draw my girlfriend's picture?" And I was really quiet and shy. Now, I thought I was interesting, but nobody else did because I was quiet and shy. But my best friend was standing next to me, and she says, "Well, how much are you going to pay her?" And he squirmed and he thought, and he says, $2? And she said, "She'll take it." And I always considered that my first commission. So after high school, my family moved to Jersey. So I grew up on the other end of the state. I'm from northeast of Philadelphia, a little town called Eddington, which was in Bensalem Township. And my father was in construction, but he did kind of cool stuff. He built like everything. And like in October, we weren't allowed in the basement until Christmas because, my bike got remade 3 times while I was growing up. It just got cooler and cooler as I grew up. He also built a 38-foot catch in our backyard, which I thought was really cool. Is that picture? Can you tell that? Where is that? Did we leave it in the car? Well, anyway, I had done a little painting of the boat. So when I moved to Jersey, I had to work for a living because I took some classes at college for art, and the teacher was one of those science teachers turned artist. I think he threw axes at things, and that's how he did his artwork. So I didn't learn very much from him, but it was something nice to do. But I would do portraits at work. I was in computers. One of the things I was told in high school was don't go into art. You can't make a career out of it. Go into computers. So I did. I hated it, but it paid the bills. And so I did that, and I would do portraits of people that sat next to me. I'd take it home. They'd leave the desk, and I'd grab a picture. I'd go home, and I'd draw, and I'd come back, and I'd give it to them. And then it started like a little commission thing where I made a little bit of money here and there, which was kind of cool. One of the things that happened to me in high school was I came out to visit Pittsburgh. Our school had an orchestra. It was a brand new orchestra. I played violin. I played an awful violin. I was the only one in my family who wasn't musical. And I would sit in my bedroom, and my father had built me an art desk, and I would draw on it. And I would think, this is such a lonely life. So I would try and play music. But the good thing was, even though we were a really bad orchestra, we came out to Pittsburgh to do an exchange concert with Bethel Park's high school orchestra. Only we were so bad they didn't exchange back. But in the process, I came into the auditorium, put down my violin case, and saw this really nice looking young man moving choral risers. And I went up and actually introduced myself to him. And that ended up being my husband. So that's how I ended up in Pittsburgh. He stole me. He took me away from all the water. I'm a sailor. He took me away from sailing and brought me to Pittsburgh. And I said, it's not the same. And he says, but we have the Mon River. And I said, so anyway, he's always been a really great supportive husband about my artwork. Matter of fact, our first apartment, we had a coat closet with my desk and a TV table in front of it. So every time we needed a coat, we had to move my stuff away to get into the closet. But as we, started to move on, I made friends with a gallery, Custom Corners. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It doesn't exist now. But back in the day, they had a gallery out in Greensburg, and we ended up moving to Greensburg for Tom's job. And they asked me to do portraits in front of their store, which was really cool because I didn't have to pay mall rent. I was in their store. They did the matting and the framing. And we created a relationship, and it was a lot of fun. And then Tom quit his job and went into the ministry, and we moved back to Pittsburgh. And a couple years later, we were walking through Village Square, and there was a Custom Corners there. And I reassociated myself with them. I started doing portraits at the end of their store again. And one day, the woman's husband came up and said, "Would you do a streetcar painting for me? I've asked 3 other artists. I didn't really like their work." And he says, "And if I don't like what you do," he says, "I'll still sell it in my gallery." And I thought, well, what do I have to lose? But I told him, I said, "I've never drawn a building before. I've only ever drawn portraits." So, I had a little dilemma because I didn't have any classes. So I didn't learn perspective. I just knew foreshortening, for a portrait. You just made sure, like, when the hands come towards you, you make them smaller. So so it kind of all balanced out. But I was really lucky. I lived next door to a graphic artist. For a year, we went back and forth in and out of the houses, carrying big stuff. And finally, we said, "What do you do?" And his name was Gary Demick, and he ended up being my mentor. And he would spend hours teaching me perspective. And at the time, my bus stop was Kaufman's. And so I thought, well, if I do a painting of a streetcar, I had already learned that people for generations met under Kaufman's clock. So I thought that would be the corner that I would pick, to do this streetcar painting. And Gary would spend hours making sure, and I would go next door. He'd tell me what I did wrong. I'd cry a little bit. I'd come back and I'd work it up again, and I'd bring it back, and and it went back and forth like that until it finally stood straight. And then I painted over it. So as you can see, I work in pastel chalk. So my way of painting is I do a complete sketch first, and then I actually paint over it. So anyway, I was going to call it the meeting place because, people met under Kaufman's clock, right? And he says, "Nah, it's not a good title." I says, "But everybody says, 'I'll meet you under Kaufman's clock.'" And he says, "Well, why don't you call it that?" I says, "That's a really long title, but okay." So this is actually, you'll have to forgive me. I did notice it's starting to fade over these because these are lithographs, even though it wasn't in the bright light, it's still fading a bit. So, but anyway, this is my first building I ever drew. Besides the house, with the windows and the sidewalk that goes up to the front door, I did that. Okay. As I was painting it, I wanted somebody in the window looking like it was getting decorated for Christmas. So I said to Tom, I said, "Could you act like you're putting a wreath up?" So he stood in my studio, and he kind of went into this position, and I drew him into the painting. And I really believe the title sold half the paintings. I mean, I sold this print out right away. The gallery would call me up and said, "You got to sign more prints." I'd get up there, people would be standing in line holding the prints. The girls in the back would say, "I'm so sick and tired of reading this thing." And it was like my first experience with doing prints as well. And I was doing a signing for this. And I'm really short, I'm like 5 foot, okay? So this really tall man comes in, and he's wearing a trench coat because back then it was cool, and he was a lawyer, and he had tears in his eyes. And he told me that he had to buy this print because it reminded him of his mom. He says, one day we went into town like we normally did, but I was like old enough because she told me I could run around town as long as I met her back under Kaufman's clock at 1:00. And I went home, and one of the things I always liked about portraits was that connection I had with the family that I did the portrait for. It brought them joy, it made them smile, and it it always made me want to do more. And I talked to Tom and I said, this is like doing a portrait for the city. It's not just like one family at a time. I can paint one painting and like 1,000 people could like it, And so it was something new and fun and adventurous for me. And so I had to learn how to draw buildings on my own. So Gary was there to support me through the first several buildings until I finally got the knack of it. But the second one I did was the Cathedral of Learning, which was good and bad at the same time. My experience with the cathedral was when I left on that day from Pittsburgh and went back to my school, we stopped at the Cathedral of Learning to go through the nationality rooms. And as a little budding artist, I fell in love with the painted rooms. And I just enjoyed it so much so that when it was time to paint my second painting in Pittsburgh, I had to paint the cathedral. Now, you would have thought that was a really nice idea until you come across somebody who went to Penn State or Duquesne, who said to me, well, I was going to collect your Pittsburgh stuff, but I'm not putting that up on my wall. And I was like, oh no, what did I do? But, it's a little bit symbolic, it has the Pittsburgh sky in it, and you have a sunset at the end of the rain, kind of like going through college. And I had a person sitting on the bench, just like this one right here, only he wasn't in a raincoat. And I realized he looks like he's getting rained on. So I took him out. And we were coming home from the store, and he says, well, now there's a hole in your composition. And I says, okay, when we get home, you put on your trench coat, and you sit there in the dining room, and I drew him into the painting. So that by the time I got to my third painting, which was called Wishing Under the Forest Tree, it was a vertical. The people were going to be small. I didn't need anybody to pose for me. But I was doing a signing for this when someone came up and said, where are you putting your husband in your next painting? And I went home and I said, hon, I said, they're expecting you. And so he put on his trench coat and hat, and he stood against the wall right here, looking very suspicious, actually. And it was the year that Dick Tracy came out with Warren Beatty, and his trench coat was kind of yellowish, and so he kind of looked like Dick Tracy on that corner, so we kind of like pushed it back a little bit. So that ended up being a thing for my paintings. People would actually look for where Tom was in my next painting. And it got so funny that by the time I did this piece called My Hometown, this is a smaller version of the original. If you look in the second window, there's a fellow wearing a hat. That's fun. So I did 5 paintings of Pittsburgh. I did also, let me take this. Sorry about that, YouTube. I'll bring that. I'm coming back. After I did that piece, I did this piece, which is Sharing the Season at Market Square. And it was back when Jenny Lee Bakery was still there. But there also, one of the things I wanted to do with this painting was I wanted to really showcase the 1902 building in Nicholas T. But there was this block in between Jenny Lee Bakery and those buildings. And at the time, it wasn't a Greek store that you could sit down and have dinner at. It was a basic cement block. So I took that block out, okay? Because you can do that as an artist, right? And, and I went on, and actually this is Tom right here, and this is the first time my daughter shows up in one of my paintings. She is now 35. The woman sitting feeding the pigeons. I had a woman from our church pose for me, but I actually watched Mary Poppins, and I was fascinated with the woman who sat on the steps feeding the birds. And so I kind of used her clothing, in the painting. And I actually went down to Market Square on a Sunday morning when nobody was downtown on weekends. And it was right after a fresh snowstorm. And I got down there, and I was across the square, and there was a woman feeding pigeons out of a bread bag. And there had to have been 1,000 pigeons. So in the painting, you'll see flying pigeons all over. I just kept snapping pictures at the time and put it in together. And then I finished the series with my hometown. And then I don't have it here in front of me, but I ended up having so many people call about the first Kaufman's clock that I'm sure many of you might know Jess Hager. Knew Jess Hager? Okay, so I went to Jess and I says, what do? I says, I have all these people asking about Kaufman's clock. I've already painted it. And he says, Linda, you could paint the same corner as many times as you want from any different angle you want. And so I did. I did a painting called Meet Me Under Kaufman's Clock too, with the T-O-O, like also. And I did a different version of it, and I finished that series. And after that, I switched publishers, and I went with another publisher. I had always wanted to paint Kennywood, and my first publisher never wanted any part of Kennywood. He was a Westview Park fan. And so there was another fella who ran Black Swan Gallery in Carnegie. And he had been telling me for about a year, like, if you ever want me to work together, I could publish work, you know. And so I kind of, like, the day that I had to say goodbye to my first publisher, I went to him and I said, I really, really, I can work with you now. I really have this great idea for this series. And he says, well, I have a great idea too. I says, well, you tell me yours, but I'm going to tell you mine afterwards, but I really want to do mine. And he says, well, I thought we could do some Kennywood together. And it was like, ah. So, you know, it was just an amazing experience to work with him, to do these paintings of Kennywood. I ended up painting Kennywood for 10 years. I did a painting a year. The first one I painted was the carousel. Do you guys? We don't have that here, huh? Do we have any carousels here? Okay. So I painted the carousel. The fellow that used to take the tickets off the carousel, Tony Sacramento, great guy, been there 60 years. He had had a stroke, but he came, I called up Kennywood and I asked if I could bring a whole bunch of people in on opening day. And I got there and Tony was there. And we sat and we talked on a bench for a while. And then he got up on the carousel. And one of the things about Tony was he always rode it backwards and kind of like hanging out. And so he got up there and he rode it just like he always rode. And I was able to take photographs of it and create it. So it was just a really neat way to start the series. The second painting I did was Noah's Ark. And it was the year they changed the ride from the blue whale to the elevator. But I had painted it like with the old way, with the blue whale. The year that I was invited to come to Kennywood to do a show, I set up everything. I had the painting on an easel. People would see the print. They'd walk up to the Noah's Ark. That year they had had a really bad winter and they couldn't open the ride because they were still working on it. And so it was under construction tape everywhere, no landscaping. People would come back down the hill and say, can I buy a print from you? Because they couldn't make any new memories with the new ride. One of my greatest thrills was when they brought the ride back and put the blue whale back in its place. And I said, you made my painting look new again. So I went on and I did Coasting Through Kennywood. That was with this one right here. I'm not sure YouTube can see it. But it's the Jackrabbit and the Racer. And there's a lot of, this is my original. This is the not for sale original. The reason it is not for sale is it has too many memories. And being a minister's wife and being very poor, I actually had someone come to the house that wanted to buy it. And I told them no. And then Tom came home from church and I said, I have to tell you something. I can't sell this one. He says, it just means too much. There's so many things in it that mean so much to me. This is my husband and my girls. And these are all friends. And this fella here was my mentor, Gary. This family here, their daughter was best friends with my daughter. And they actually posed for me in their backyard on a picnic bench, holding an old broom and a broken hoe. This couple were in my dining room with tennis rackets. So, I'd do anything to put a painting together, right? But this was my view for 18 years while I was at Kennywood, when I was set up for their show over 4th of July. But this is also where my husband almost proposed to me. He just loves his story. So we were long distance. We were long distance for, actually ended up being 4 years. We were long distance. And so we only had like the telephone, But on our third date, I came out here to Pittsburgh for the first time, and he took me to Kennywood. And that week, prior to coming out, I had 2 dreams. The first dream was that he proposed to me with this really gaudy ring that he got out of a bubblegum machine. The second night, I dreamt that we were getting married, but we were in a JP's office, and we were sitting there instead of in a church. And we were sitting there, and a couple comes out, and we said, how was it? And they said, go find a church. It's terrible. You're just like a number. They cattle you in and cattle you out. And it was like, oh. So I'm standing on this bridge overlooking this nice lake, and I'm telling Tom, who had been trying to propose to me, but didn't quite do it yet. And I was telling him about my dreams. And he got this really odd look on his face, and he just walked away. And I thought, oh my gosh, what did I do? So he ended up proposing the next night, right before I got on the airplane to leave. It was the last loading call for my flight. We had 5 minutes, and managed to call his parents and tell them that I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to be your daughter-in-law. And they were waiting for him when he got home. And I got on the airplane, and I was so giddy. I was 19. So third date, long distance, 19. I get on the plane. I said to this guy, I just got engaged. And this guy says, great, I've been divorced twice. And by the time I got off the plane, he was congratulating me. I get off the plane, and there's my father, my mother, my brother. And my father says, congratulations. My mother smiles. And my brother says, you stupid idiot. But that was now 42 years ago since we got married, almost. And so we did make it. Everything's good. But anyway, this piece just reminds me of everything. I have best friends in here, people from our church. It's just really special. So after I did that one, I did the magical entrance to Kennywood, which is like coming through the tunnel. And what was really cool about that, a couple things was there was a family, like when you come through the tunnel at Kennywood, there was photographers that would take your picture, and then try and sell you the picture later on, right? Okay. So this family sent me pictures of them getting their picture taken and said, could we be in your painting? And I was like, sure. So I painted them in. But one of the neat things is when I finished the painting at Kennywood, I would always go to that day that I finished and experience that moment. So like we walked through the tunnel, and it was like the same plants I just planted in the planters, and and it was like I felt like I was walking into the painting. And so I finished with the series with the Thunderbolt and Audrey Good's neighbor right there. Audrey was, I had 55 people in this painting, okay? I swear I'd never do a painting with 55 people that I knew again, because as being like a perfectionist, I had to. But anyway, Audrey Good came up to me. Everybody planned out, and she asked if she could be in the painting. I says, well, the corn dog stand was in the painting. And I says, I need somebody standing in line at the corn dog stand. So I literally took a picture of her back, really, and it was so great. Like the day that my painting got released, she actually had a party at her house for the Thunderbolt. And it was just like a fun thing, But I have met people who either know Audrey Good or have been neighbors to Audrey Good. And now tonight I met you, who is her neighbor. I said, she's just meant to be in my life, So I'm going to stop for a second. Does anybody have any questions?
Who did you use for your prints? Like who printed them and how did you find them?
Okay, so that has changed over the years. I have gone to many printers over the years. Is it GACC? There was one on First Avenue. I was there. I was at Hochstetter's. They did a lot of my Kennywood, General Press up in Natrona Heights. They did several of my paintings, and then it was Alpha Screen Graphics did my paintings for a long time, and then I was going to start my Santa series, and Alpha Screen Graphics weren't very good at doing facial colors. They did great cement work, you know? I mean, like the prints turned out pretty good. But I was really looking because I knew that this was going to be so important to do the Santa Claus series. I was actually visiting Christine's and she had just done threads. And there was a giclée of it right next to the painting. And I said, oh my gosh, Christine, who did this? And she said, Alex Ceter. And so there's a funny story about that. About 20 years ago, Alex Ceter Sr. very quietly would come up to me at different shows and he'd say, I do a test, it's free, I do a test. And I'd say, no, Alex, I'm good. You know, I've been working I'm a loyalist. So I was with Alpha Screen Graphics and I was with Alpha Screen Graphics. And then I got really, really frustrated with Alpha Screen Graphics. But for 20 years, it seemed like every show that we crossed paths, he'd say, I do a test. Finally, I called up that day and I said, hello, Alex, Senior, right? I said, this is Linda Barnicott. He starts laughing on the phone. Okay, and so like I am used to sitting with the technician and making sure everything's exactly like I like. And he says, bring it to my house, drop it off, you can pick it up tomorrow. And I was like, oh no. But I did. I had painted this piece. You want to find me, Shush? It's over there somewhere. It's on the floor. I had painted this piece.
I'm like those people at the boxing matches in the round.
So there were colors that Alpha Screen Graphics could not get, and that were the blues and the peaches. Like I just could not see those colors. And so these blues, I would have never gotten with Alpha Screen Graphics. Okay. So the next day I come back.
Giclée or?
This is a giclée, yeah. And Alpha Screen Graphics was giclée too, but they could not get the colors. It was terrible. But anyway, drove me nuts. I mean, he did it in one night. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is a miracle, you know? So we started working together, and I'm very happy to have been working with him ever since. And he is, I think, the best technician out there. And I found that out by meeting a lot of Pittsburgh artists who used him long before I ever did. And it was like, why did I wait so long?
All the illustrators here now use
I was
Alex.
like,
Yeah.
why did I wait so long? My life could have been so much easier. I mean, like, they are the kindest, nicest people you could ever meet. He holds the door for me. He carries my stuff. He stands there and waves, both him and his dad. It was just lovely. But Alex Sr., the next day after I showed up to see the Shush painting, he's got his arms folded. And he's looking at me. He goes, 20 years. It took you 20 years. So I probably am one of his biggest fans at this point. And I am a cheerleader. If I really like something, I will cheer it, to everybody. So the Santa paintings, how did they happen? I was set up as a vendor at the holiday market in town. 6 months before, we were doing a press conference for this new holiday market that was coming to Pittsburgh. They asked me to set up my little table of wares, and this Santa comes in with this big, bold voice, ho, 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 and I thought, he is the greatest Santa I've ever met. And I went and got my picture taken with him. I still have that picture of him. The first year we were there, I didn't see too much of them, but the second year they moved me, and I was en route to his Santa house. And he would stop and we'd talk about doing Santa paintings. And he would bring like his little like workshop apron and his little toy reindeer and his naughty and nice book. And so we just brainstormed doing these paintings. And this last year, I don't know, do any of you know Harold Bearfingle Advertising? He's really, really good at marketing, and he helped me write my first book. So it's really kind of fun. It has like all the paintings in it, the detail, and then like the full painting, but the stories about the paintings and behind the paintings and everything. So I was able to do those 10 paintings, and I did another one. Do you want to bring them up?
One step ahead of you.
So this one actually is my granddaughter. She posed, she was 4.5 months old. He came over for a photo shoot, and the question was, what if? You know, what if he could hold her and we could get a picture and she wouldn't cry? And it happened for a split second. I was able, I'm a lousy photographer. It was yellow, it was blurry, but I had pictures of him and pictures of her. So I was able to pull it off as a painting. And this is with this Naughty and Nice book. And this is not in the book. This was actually a painting I did after I was done the 10 paintings because I couldn't stop. So you're more than welcome to look at them. We created a lot of different, this one was an accident. It's called Santa's Joyride. I was returning a prop to the neighbor, and when she opened the garage door, there was a Fat Boy Harley sitting there. I was like, oh my gosh, we got to do this. And there was a young photographer with us that day who had a leather jacket, and as long as Santa didn't zip it, it worked. And so, and you know, when I paint, you know, I'm still doing the sketch underneath and everything like that. But in this particular painting, I kept seeing swirling snow and blue, you know, and so I was able to create that with the painting. What was really neat was I have this little dog holding on for dear life, you know, in the back of the motorcycle, and I named him after his real name. His real name is Michael, so it's kind of an odd name for a dog, but his name is Michael. And the fellow who bought the original was in law enforcement and rode Harleys, and his parents rode Harleys. And he was really interested in the original. He's from Maryland. And he came up to see the original. And when I told him that the dog's name was Michael, he started there was choking up. And he said that the patron saint for police officers on motorcycles is Saint Michael. And so that kind of that went to a really good home. So, and then this is Santa's. Now, he had a little puppet. I made it into a real deer. So, but as you can see, he's like the perfect face for Santa with the ruddy cheeks and the blue eyes and everything. But the other thing that happened, and I told Christine I'd tell this story, is I don't know if you saw this or not. This is a billboard. Okay, this actually happened. I had a billboard on the West End Bridge. Okay, at the end of the West End Bridge, it was a 40-foot billboard. And what happened was Tom and the girls and I went out west. And, you know, when you go out west, there's a lot of nothing out there when you get so far. But there would be these billboards about wall drug that's just on the other side of the Badlands. And they were very comical, you know, coffee and stuff like that, just different cartoons and things. By the time you got to the Badlands, you wanted to go through the Badlands and you wanted to stop at Wall Drug. So on the way back, I said to Tom, if we start in the desert and we put a billboard up and we say, come to Pittsburgh and buy a Linda Barnicott print. By the time they got to Pittsburgh, they'd have to buy a print. Okay, so I had just gotten back from my trip, and a new store down in Strip, thank you. Nooks and Crannies had just opened up, and they had already started ordering right before I left, and they were reordering my work by the time I got back. And I told her about this idea about doing a billboard. And she says, I've always wanted to do a billboard. And we called up Lamar, and they had this broken billboard. It didn't have lights, but for $800, we could have a month of a billboard. Okay, so we went in together, and she put up her store name, and I had my website and her address and my phone number, and it was really cool, my painting. And it was fun because at the time, Tom being a retired minister, at the time he had a church in the West End. And so like they took one of those tour buses, and like the whole church was coming across the bridge, and they all saw me, all started clapping, and it was like really cool. But if you want to know how things evolve, okay, there was a fellow, his name is Ned West. Some of you might know him actually. You know Ned, right? So Ned West calls me up out of the blue, says he works for HDS Marketing, wants to know if I'd like to put my artwork on some things, for, different items. And we ended up doing some mugs together, and it was really nice and everything. And, and time happened, and we kind of like lost touch with each other after a while. And he called me up and he said, I was thinking, Linda Barnicott, Wendell August Forge. Linda Barnicott, Wendell August Forge, both from Pennsylvania, both doing handmade items. And so he got us together on a lunch. Now, the day of the lunch was February, it was big 2010, right? Okay. It was the day of the blizzard. Okay. We went into lunch, it wasn't snowing. We came out of lunch, it was snowing. Okay. That's how I remember it. 1 month to the day when the August Forge burned down. Now, we had a really great lunch, and I was really, really hopeful. And when that happened, it was like, lost that opportunity. The day before Wendell August Forge burnt down, the Penguins gave them their biggest order. It was the final season ticket holders' final ticket for Mellon Arena. The day after the fire, the Penguins went up with a check paid in full. And they were able to get equipment to do that order and to restart again. So the Penguins really saved them. Come June, I started to hear things about maybe we could do something together. September, they invited me up. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to sell them on me. I brought my painting I did of Mellon Arena. I brought a whole bunch of prints and stuff like that. And I walk in, and there's like 25 people standing in front of me. And it's like the owner, the director of marketing, it's the master engravers, who took a fine tooth to my Mellon Arena, by the way. I mean, like I was a nervous wreck because again, self-taught, And but anyway, Christian, who was the vice president at the time, had introduced me and said, hello, everybody. I wanted to introduce you. This is Linda Barnicott, our artist of our new Linda Barnicott collection. And at that point, I just floated away. So they created these wonderful images of my work in aluminum. And then later on, I was doing ceramic ornaments, and that place burned down. I'm not bad luck, really I'm not, okay? It was a Bunting and Company. It was in East Liverpool, and they did ceramic ornaments for me. And when they burnt down, I called Wendell August Forge and I said, could you do me color ornaments? And they actually created a whole line of like trays and ornaments and everything for me, which is really, really nice. So you may ask, why did I do this with my artwork? Like, why is it just not like paint a painting, sell the original, and just leave it? Well, the whole publisher thing started, so I had the prints. And I had little note cards, because when they do a run of prints, they just run the note cards behind it. So I had those two items. But the first year I was at Kennywood, there was a major storm, and like all the paintings I had in my tent, you can tell I never did this before, on easels, of course, got knocked over, out into the rain. It was a disaster, But John Rogers from Kennywood came over to me and he says, Linda, not everybody can afford a frame painting print of your work. You need to really have something for every pocketbook. And that really made me start thinking about, I would love it if like a child could come into my booth and buy something for their mom or dad. So I did like the individual note cards, and I created magnets that they could buy. And then I started thinking about other things that like would be like a little bit higher and a little bit more, just different. Like not everybody has room for prints on their walls. I found that out when my collectors started saying I don't have any more room for prints on my walls. And so I started creating different pieces of artwork on posters, trays. I would do short runs like, throws or night lights or just fun things. And like when they were done, So I have some awards that I won. If you guys want to look over here. But one of the things that I won was in 2007, I was invited to New York City to the Lincoln Center for the Forbes Enterprise Award. It was actually for entrepreneurs. And I won the art section of a tri-state contest with New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And I was awarded that. It was like really cool, but it was really based on my business, not on my art ability. So I've done different things, like I was asked to the American Cancer Society, the 17 years. The reason why it closed down was because it got to the point where the postage was going up and people were starting to do email cards. And so they were starting, and they also went through a big staff change at the time. And so, but for 17 years, I did their holiday cards. It was wonderful. I gave them the image for September through December, and they could do whatever they wanted with it. And then at the end, then I would be able to do my note cards and my prints and different things like that. But I am very proud of the fact that they earned that much money for cancer research and prevention. I was very sad that they closed the program now. But a lot of people would ask me, don't I do anything other than winter season? And that's a major reason why. Also, a fun thing that happened was MTH Trains did 9 of my paintings on their train cards, which was kind of cool. And I still see them coming at me for me to sign them and stuff. It's fun how people find you and opportunities open up, and I just kind of like, I keep an open mind so that like when things do happen, I try to do things that will be fun. One of the things I'm really proud of right now, I know it's only a little painting. This is called Unbroken, the Heart of Ukraine. And it is a painting that I have in print now that I'm selling through a church, the Unitarian Church, Sunny Hill. And proceeds, like everything except for the printing costs and the shipping and handling, go to Ukraine. And so far, I think we're up to about 72 of 72 prints that we've sold so far. So I was actually stuck in traffic on the Liberty Bridge, something nobody's ever experienced, right? And I was thinking about Ukraine, I was thinking about the Lord, I was thinking, what can I do? And I thought about the sunflowers, and I've seen some sunflower paintings, and I thought I could do that. And I Googled, because there was no moving on the Liberty Bridge. So I was Googling sunflowers, and a sunflower came up in the shape of a heart. And you can actually buy seeds that when you plant, they grow up with a heart-shaped face. And I thought, oh, that'd be really cool. And then I envisioned the tear. And so like, this is kind of like symbolic. We have the Ukrainian flag with the yellow and the blue, and some very sad sunflowers, and then some new life for hope. And there's a unity with all the sunflowers facing the sun. So it's just a really neat thing. So that's something I've been doing. And then some of the landscapes that you see are plein air landscapes where I actually stood and painted them. This was actually the very first plein air piece I did up in New York City. It was 55 degrees. I was freezing, but it was a lot of fun. At this point, I'm going to open it up for questions. Yes?
Tell us about the pickle, how that came about, pickle.
Picklesburg.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, because of my relationship with the holiday market at Christmas, the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership also runs Picklesburg, and for years they said, you need to paint a pickle because you need to be at Picklesburg because it's an amazing event. And so they allowed me into their archives, and I looked at a lot of photographs, 4 years worth of photographs. And that's kind of a combination of a couple different photographs because, well, just the way I painted it, the city wasn't in the background, but part of that view kind of thing. And if you're looking for Tom, he's right there. But I probably had more fun painting that Heinz pickle than anything else in that painting. Because for me, when I paint, I feel like it's lifting off of the page. You were talking about 3D painting, and that's how it feels when I do my paintings. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the process you have there, the watercolor wash?
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Fascinating look at that.
Okay. So I just started this. The day that I do the Home and Garden Show. This year was the 27th year of the Home and Garden Show for me. And we got up very early to move in, and we had to take the U-Haul truck down Arlington Avenue, since now we live in Brentwood. So we were coming down the hill, and the sun was hitting the buildings, like the fresh sunshine just coming out. And I said, we got to go back there. We got to go back there. And so about a month ago, we went back and we took a whole bunch of photographs. Again, I'm a lousy photographer. So this is one of my photographs. But again, as you can see, I've used UArt paper. It's on a board. It's museum quality. So I did the sketch. So I do a sketch on tissue first, work out all the problems, and then I transfer it with graphite paper underneath of it, and I transfer it onto here, and then I spray it. And then I do a watercolor wash. And the reason for the water, it's my roadmap, because what happens, as you can see how the tops of the buildings are kind of hardly distinguishable. When I start putting, this is all pastel down so far on the sky, but as I get into the pastel, I lose lines all the time. So it's, it's just how so the watercolor really kind of at least it helps me kind of see it, So it's not just white paper either. So I'll be doing what I'll do next. Now that I've got the sky kind of in, not where I want it to be yet, but it's in. I'll start working. I'm left-handed, so I tend to work right to left, top to bottom, and sometimes center out. But in this case, I'll be working right to left, and I'll just envision it as I go. So that's how I do it. And then I do not spray it once it's done. I will bang it. I will get the dust off of it, but I will get it under glass as fast as possible. Any questions?
Who are the little girls over there?
Oh, this is an early Barnicott. This is actually my oldest daughter, Brittany, and my youngest daughter, Alyssa. That is their personality picture. My oldest daughter was the ballerina. She was the serious, conscientious, meticulous child. And this one's a little imp. And she still is at 30 years old. She's a mother of 3. And her children are going to be just as dramatic as she is. We're looking forward to it. We're really lucky where we live in Brentwood. Our grandchildren only live 8 minutes away. So, and my other daughter only lives 10 minutes further, so it's lovely. So, but I only did pencil work until I was 19. When I was 19, I was working at RCA in New Jersey before we got married. And there was a woman in my office that wanted me to do a color portrait of her. And she bought me my first Grombacher set. And it was like 12 half sticks. And I went home and I got out my velour paper. And I drew her portrait on velour paper. I still remember what that portrait looks like. Yeah, but she's the one who started me with pastels. But I really had a hard time controlling pastels. When we got married in 1981, I had been looking at the Artist magazine, and there was a fellow by the name of Daniel Green up in New York. And we talked, and I decided to take a trip up to Daniel Green's workshop. Now, again, I was self-taught up to that point, and the way I drew portraits is I'd start with the eye, and then I'd work over to the nose and the other eye, and then I'd work down the face, and then I'd work out the face. And I knew, like, people in college had the egg thing going, you know, and I never could do that, you know. And I get up there, and I'm really nervous because I'm 23, I'm young, I bought my first set of Grombacher pastels to take up with me, and the first night he did a demonstration. And dang it, if he didn't start with the first eye, and he went to the nose, and he went to the second eye, and he did it exactly the way that I had, and I thought, this is easy now. I know how to get a likeness. All I have to do is figure out how to control these pastels. And he was really good at teaching color harmony. And so it didn't look like my people looked like 500 pounds and their faces got really big. So Daniel Green, what's that?
Was Green using pastel?
Yes, he did both pastels and oils. And I was going to do both pastels and oils. And matter of fact, I was telling Christine, I was playing in oils, I was dabbling in oils, and I got pregnant. And my doctor said, I'm sorry, you cannot do oils because of the fumes. So then I was breastfeeding, and he says, you can't do oils while you're breastfeeding. And then she was 2, and I wasn't doing oils. So all this time I'm doing pastels, right? So she's 4, I start dabbling in oils again, I get pregnant again. By the time my second one was 4, I was a pastel artist.
And I sold the big oil.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. But I really, you know, at the time, pastels did not get a good rap. You know, it was like the little thing. Like everybody wanted oils, you know. And watercolors, I considered watercolors like the violin in an orchestra. I just thought that was the hardest medium to ever use. I still do. I only use it as a roadmap, you know, and it doesn't look too good, but it works for me, you know. So pastels just became my thing, and I just kept at it. And I told Christine, I really was on my own. Like I didn't know other pastel artists in Pittsburgh. I just did my own thing over and over and over again. And back, I guess it was 2010, was it, that I went away? There was a landscape artist named Richard McKinley. Some of you might know that name. And I saw his landscapes and I thought, I really like them. Like I do all this cement work, you know? And then when I get to the background, like it just, you know? And it's like, I need to learn how to do landscapes. So I saw this landscape artist and I thought, I'm going to take a workshop. So I called up the first workshop, which was in New York, and they said, it's full, you're 11th on the waiting list. So then I called up another workshop that's in Washington, thinking it was Washington, D.C. And they said, you're, I think I was like 21st on the list. And then he was coming to Penn State. And I thought, I'll get him in Penn State. Well, all the guild members already were, you know, there was a long waiting list there too, right? So I kind of gave up the idea of going. And sorry, YouTube. I gave up the idea of going, and a phone call came in, and they said, we worked through the list, you can come to New York City. I was so excited. I called Tom up, I says, you're taking a vacation week, and you're coming to New York City, and you're gonna help me move around, navigate the city. And he did, which is very nice of him. And I did that first plein air piece and a couple other plein air pieces while I was up there. But the material list came in, and it was nothing that I used. The pastels weren't anything that I used. The paper wasn't anything that I used. Plein air easels, I used a homemade desk that my father made me, you know? So here I am in New York with everything that I know nothing about, sitting there and looking up at this guy with these big eyes, very passionate man. And he said to me, he says, "You mean you don't know any of these materials?" I said, "I have absolutely no idea." I remember the first time I touched the UART paper, because I used Canson paper, and I touched this, it was like, oh, that's really nice. That's really nice. And it felt so painterly, you know, because there was a lot of strokes to get that same look on Canson paper, trust me. So anyway, I get back and I'm thinking, oh, I could do like a show of like plein air, you know, pieces, right? I had like what, 3? So I get back and I get a phone call, and they called up and it's Washington, and they says, "We worked through the list and you're up. Do you want to come?" And I called Tom up at the church and I says, "What do I do? I just came back from New York." He says, "Did you get a lot out of it?" I says, "Yeah." He says, "Go." I says, "Well, it's like 9 days, you know." And I called up and I said, I want to come. How long does it take to like drive there? What's the address? And she says, "Where are you coming from?" And I says, "Well, you know, Pittsburgh." And I says, "It's not that long of a ride." She goes, "This is the state of Washington." I was like, holy crap. So my first experience of actually shipping my materials out there and then flying out there, renting a car in a city I knew nothing about, it was an amazing experience. And it was so different than what I had done, like with the Kennywoods and with the Pittsburgh stuff. About halfway through that workshop, my brain froze, and I forgot how to paint. And I said to Richard, I said, I don't know how to paint right now. And he goes, "I'm so sorry." It took about 24 hours, but I got back in and it just needed to process, and I couldn't process that fast. So I got back from that trip, and guess who called? Penn State. And so I was off for another, so I called myself a Richard McKinley groupie at that point. But he really did. He changed my life because I started painting, and I really like the way I handle the landscapes now. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's what I do. So, do you have any other questions? Yes.
Yes, could you talk about the religious painting? And I love hearing your stories. It's just so fascinating. And whatever happened to the drawing that you did in 2nd grade?
I have no clue. Sad.
I didn't know if you got into trouble for drawing.
No, I didn't get into any trouble for it, but I have no idea where that went. But that's my first memory.
Okay.
So, not 18 months. Okay, this is my $2.50 painting. Okay, Tom and I were just married. He had just, he was getting ordained as a minister with United Methodist Church. I need to make sure I'm here. His favorite scripture was, at the time, the road to Emmaus. And we had no money. I mean, like, literally no money. And I was trying to figure out what I could do for an ordination gift for him. So he was at a conference. I wasn't going to see him until that Sunday when he was going to get ordained. So in the playpen next to me was my daughter, Brittany. And I had a piece of pastel paper. And I painted that. And I went to Rolliers and they cut me a piece of glass. And I picked up the frame in an estate sale. So I paid $1 for the frame and $1.50 for the cut glass. That's museum glass now. I just got that done, by the way. But for all those years, it was the regular glass from Rolliers hardware store in Bethel Park. And I gave him that as his ordination gift. So thank you. So, do you want to say anything about it?
I love it. It hangs in our bathroom. Because in the house we have in Brentwood now, we don't have the room. Every other house we've had has been really, really good with wall space in that. The house we bought in Brentwood is a 1935 building. And I guess they didn't collect art back then, and they didn't have plugs, and they didn't need closet space. It doesn't have any of that. So it's in the bathroom. but I see it all the time.
That is true, that is true. So,
I had another question. Daniel Green, is he known for portraits? Because I think there's a portrait by him hanging in Heinz Hall.
there is, yeah,
Of William Sweetwater.
yeah, yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, he has passed. He just passed, I think, last year. Christine and I we went back. I went back after all those years, and he had a method. I mean, like for me, it was like being 23 again. Like he said the same things over and over, which was really good because it was very good for me. But it was his last workshop.
Yeah, we went together.
And we went together, we read them together, I snored, she hated me. And then she put on rain music as background so she could sleep, and then I couldn't sleep. So we had promised never to room again.
But we're still friends. That's all.
But we were still great friends. But yeah, Daniel Green was just wonderful. And actually, he did my portrait. It's really funny. I smile a lot. I don't know if you noticed that or not. But when I was a little girl, I was very self-conscious about my teeth. And my grandmother, when I was very young, said to me that if you smile every day, you'll grow up with a smile on your face. So I literally took her at her word, and it worked. So I sat down to do this portrait with Daniel Green, and I'm sitting there and I'm grinning. And he goes, "You're not going to want to do that." I says, "Do what?" He says, "Smile." And he says, "This is going to be a long night." I says, "I got this." And he actually painted me with a smile on my face. I didn't move a minute. It was great. So,
And you bought that painting?
and I bought the painting, yes. So I'm very grateful for that too, that experience. So I have a lot of things here. I don't know if you just want to take a look around. If you do see anything, I did bring it for you. And YouTube people, if you want to look at my artwork, it's at lindabarnicott.com. And I have a website on that. Is there any other questions? Have I? I'm good. Anybody else have any questions?
What is your favorite pastel to use? What do you use?
I use a lot of different ones. I really do. I have about 4 different kinds of pastel pencils. I use new pastels, which I understand aren't as good as Creative Color as far as like their color fastness. However, I kind of grew up on new pastels, and I don't like Creative Color. I don't like the feel of them. So I bought Creative Color. I have them. They sit there. I end up using my new pastels. Gerald is another pastel. I really love that because you could do a lot of under painting with it. I use a lot of layers of pastels on my paintings, so I really built. And then I go into Sennelier. I remember when I did the Noah's Ark, that was the year I could afford my first set of Sennelier pastels. So I have the whole set of those. And the one, the Rocher. Oh gosh, she started it.
Sorry.
$20 a piece. She started
it.
But I did a painting for the Porsche Club for the Vintage Grand Prix, and it was a big commission. And my pastels just didn't have those car colors, but Rocher's Brights did. $600 later. But oh my gosh, what an amazing.
So yeah, I'm hooking up with printers, with pastels.
Yeah. Terry Ludwig. I use a lot of Terry Ludwig, Univision. I mean, whatever I can get my hands on. If there's a conference that comes every other year to Albuquerque, and they have what's called the Candy Room. Cindy knows what I'm talking about. Oh, you haven't been there? Oh, well, Christine knows what I'm talking about. So they basically, all the suppliers come in with all their pastels. And Richard McKinley said, it's a pastel's goal in life to see who has the most pastels from the I may be, yeah. But thank you. If you want to talk to me afterwards, I'll be here for a while. If you want to help me get everything to the car, hey, I'm not turning it down.
I'll find you.
But thank you.
Thank you, Linda. So nice of you to be here. And thank you to Tom Mom, for helping your lovely wife bring all of these things. I mean, we spent some time today setting all this up, and so appreciate your time so much. So thank you. Again, if you want to sign up, and I need your email to, let you know what's coming up. Sweetwater will be sending you emails so that you can see who our speakers are. Speaking of our next speaker, Duncan McDiamond. Yes, I know, it's the pronunciation. Is our speaker for next month, and he's an amazing sculptor. So he will not be bringing originals because his take up half the building here. So he does huge public installation pieces and things like that. So we'll be talking three-dimensional next month. Again, first Wednesday of June. So we'll be here again at 7 o'clock, and he'll be doing more of a PowerPoint. So you can see his originals through that. So and again, every month we try and go through a different kind of artist, different mediums. So we're gonna have some fiber artists coming up, some more illustrators. And so I hope to see you guys again. And if not, join us online on YouTube. And thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Very nice. Christine, are you